hand washing could be the most damaging car wash you can do to your vehicle, even more than a tunnel car wash if you're not doing it properly. So Sydney and I are going to teach you all the tools, the chemicals, and the techniques that you need to be able to properly hand wash a car without damaging it with scratches and everything.
Absolutely. Like you said, if done correctly, it can be not only therapeutic, but also very safe for the car.
Yeah, I've seen some hand wash techniques, like, you know, if you're using a bath towel or a grout sponge, or you're just picking up the bucket that you just mop the floor with, there's all kinds of things that you could do to potentially cause damage. Yeah, we don't want to do that to a car.
Absolutely. I mean, right when we were all little, our parents made us wash the car, and I remember using Palmolive and maybe the bath towel that I used the night before to dry the car. So yeah, absolutely.
And we all start from somewhere, but you know, paint is very sensitive. It does scratch very easily, and it takes away from the overall kind of feel of the car with those scratches and those dullness. So we want to stay away from that. So in the wash process, we have a lot of different chemicals. There's not a lot here. There's a few. You need a good tire cleaner and a good wash, and maybe a couple after sprays, and basically that's it. Some of this stuff like this we'll talk about, you don't necessarily need this. It's more of a luxury type of item in the end, but okay, how do we start the wash? Where do we start?
So typically I start on the wheels, right? Because it's the dirtiest part of the car, and then move into the wash.
All right, let's go over these wheel tools.
I like to choose a dedicated wheel and tire cleaner. There's, again, lots of them on the market. Today we're going to use Brake Buster, which is a wheel and a tire cleaner. So it's one product to do two different jobs. So it's going to clean the rubber, strip off any old dressings, and then it's also going to help you with that brake dust on the wheel. It's going to help the tools break that down. I like to use one that does both.
And when it comes to wheel cleaners and you go out and search all these different products, it can be confusing. Now this is a non-acid wheel cleaner, which is safe for most of the wheels that you're going to encounter on most cars and everything. So it's a very safe cleaner. You don't have to worry about any etching, especially with some higher end wheels or even some of the ceramic rotors and everything. It's not going to damage everything. So very safe, very effective wheel cleaner right there.
Not only do you need the right chemical to make the process work or, you know, be more efficient, you also need tools to actually help the chemical work and get the debris off the wheels, all of the brake dust. That's the other thing, is today's brakes crazy dirty like they didn't used to be, right? So a couple tools that I like, definitely like to have a good brush. This is gonna be for like the lug nuts to get in that area. This is gonna be a tool that if you wanna go that extra step. Then we've got several options here. These are for the barrels. So these help you get in, you know, get through those spokes, get all that brake dust out of the barrel. It really does help keep your wheels clean, because when you start driving, and if you don't clean your barrels and they're wet, that might kind of fling back out of there. So good idea. It takes a couple extra seconds, you know, per wheel to get those barrels clean.
We saw a lot of the tire blooming, all that brown stuff on the wheel. So we're gonna scrub the wheel with this stiff bristle brush, and we're just gonna clean that rubber. And sometimes if your wheel is really bad, you haven't cleaned it in a while, you might have to clean it twice. Also super important to get this clean, because the tire dressing is going to be able to adhere to the rubber a lot better when all that dirt is gone.
We've got this little guy here. So lots of different versions of these out there. Little wash mitt if you want to have, you know, you might have like more sensitive wheels, like a Porsche or something, that you may not want to be using a stiff brush on. Great little microfiber mitt.
This mitt here too is great for like cleaning wheel wells like this. So I'll actually use this mitt and clean inside the wheel well, especially in a truck where you have a lot of wheel well space here. But before you go clean the other wheels and tires, you want to make sure you rinse this really well in your bucket. So the process of cleaning wheels, like I like cleaning one wheel at a time. You know, kind of general rule with chemicals is you don't want any chemicals to dry on the vehicle. So I always usually pick a cool, dry spot where it's not too hot and that chemical is going to dry right away. Usually I like to make sure the wheel cools down a little bit if you just drove the car. And then what we do is literally just, I like to rinse the wheel first. You know, especially being in the north, if you have salt or sand or anything, that stuff becomes grit. And imagine, you know, sandpaper with whatever media you're using, whether it's a brush or a towel or some sort of wheel mitt, any sand trapped in there becomes a part of the sandpaper, which could damage that surface. So I like to rinse everything first.
Right.
If your wheels haven't been cleaned in a long time, just cleaning it once, you're gonna have, your tools are gonna get dirty, right?
Yeah.
And you don't wanna move on to the next wheel and use a dirty tool.
Right.
Tip and trick here is separating. Like, we have a dedicated wheel mitt that we only use on wheels. We're not gonna use the same mitt we're using on the paint, because that transfer of all the ferrous metals could end up damaging the paint. And that's one of the things that we see when people start washing, is they'll use the same towel or mitt or wash media for the wheels and the paint. That's a big no-no. So I like having a bucket of water, and you can put soap in it if you want, and rinse your tools when you move on to the next wheel.
We talked about, we rinse the wheel and the tire, and then you spray the chemical on. So I spray enough that there's enough to work in with the tools. However, I like to let it dwell for just a minute or two as well. It kind of starts to get that dirt breakdown. You want to give the chemical a little chance to start the process, so that you're not working harder than you need to. So it's going to go a lot faster, a lot easier, much more effective. And then we just rinse, right? And then it's ready to go, and we'll wash the rest of the car.
And we're using a pressure washer here. You don't need a pressure washer. It's nice to be able to really rinse out those wheel wells, especially if you have fabric wheel wells. It's hard to rinse them out with a garden hose, but there's nothing wrong with using a garden hose. You're gonna get a great wash out of this. A pressure washer is just gonna do it a little bit faster and a little bit better. We're gonna move on to the body of the car. So this is gonna be your wash. And very important here is what I like to explain, if you have contaminants on your car, again, anything that gets in that wash mitt can potentially scratch that paint. So we want to be as safe as possible. So the tools that we have and the chemicals we have are the safety measures to remove that dirt safely from the surface without scratching that paint. Again, usually I like to rinse it off.
We always start with a rinse, kind of get all that layer of dust, dirt, debris. If you are using a pressure washer, it's always nice to really pressure wash the front, get those bugs off. The front of our cars always collect a lot of dirt and who knows what else. So yes, definitely start with a pre-rinse.
Yeah. And so you can foam it before. We have a foam can here that we'll use. You can foam it to kind of let that sit on the car. This is just a regular car wash soap. It doesn't have a lot of detergents to kind of penetrate any of the film on there. But for me, it feels better to do it, because imagine your car, you're driving on the road. There's salt, there's sand, there's everything. Imagine going off-road and stuff. All the trim, all the pieces, the door handles and stuff. So, I've seen cars where I rinse the back of the cars, and I'll rinse for 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, and it just keeps pouring out.
Just getting all that stuff off. So I spend a lot of time rinsing it, because some of that damage could be caused from debris coming out from these little cracks and crevices that you want to remove. So do a nice rinse and really try to get rid of all of that. And that's kind of the first step there. And then we're gonna fill our bucket. Again, it's preference here. There's lots of different ways to wash a vehicle. You can have 2 buckets, one with soap, one with water, and then you can rinse that mitt. Or you can use 1 bucket with 3, 4, 5, 6 different mitts, just depending on what you want to do. So we're gonna fill 1 bucket with water, and then we're gonna use Pearl Auto Shampoo here. And so what is the dilution ratio? How do we mix that?
So it's about 256 to 1. So if we have a 5-gallon bucket, and say we put, I don't usually fill it all the way up. So 3-4 gallons. So this cap is a half an ounce. 256 to 1 is going to be 1 capful, which is a half an ounce per gallon. So if we do 3 gallons, we're going to put 3 capfuls. If we have 4 gallons, we're going to do 4 capfuls. Super easy. This is also one of those things that it doesn't have to be scientific either, which is really nice. So there's a lot of room for error in the soap part. So not that you want to just go start dumping it, but you don't have to be exact.
The car wash should be enjoyable. It's fun. It's not...
And Pearl is just a regular auto soap, right? So it's not going to leave behind any waxes or anything like that. This is just a great all-around soap. It's going to do a really nice job. It's got a lot of high lubricity. It's got high foaming. You can also put it in a foam cannon. So just a really, really great car shampoo.
You could damage your vehicle by not using the right soap, right? This is a soap made for
Right.
vehicles to lubricate the surface,
Yeah.
because what happens is, like if I took this and just dry rubbed the car,
Right.
like that dirt is grinding in there, and that creates the lubrication you
Right.
need for that dirt to be able to be safely off.
Yeah.
Now, common, technique, when people are starting, they just go to the kitchen and grab Dawn.
Right.
Which Dawn is formulated
Yes.
for the kitchen and dishes and greases and everything else.
It's
and
a degreaser.
yeah, and it'll certainly work, but
yeah.
when we're coming to damage, like the rubber parts of the car, the rubber trim, those could all dry out, end up cracking, and we want the longevity of this car. We want your car to look good a decade from now.
Yeah.
And by using Dawn over and over and over
It'll dry
again,
everything out.
you're gonna have these surfaces on the car that may end up start to deteriorate and start to like fade and crack because of you're stripping all of everything out of those. So a dedicated car wash shampoo is going to be pH balanced. It's going to have all the right lubricity and everything that you need to safely perform this job. All right, so fill our bucket up.
Yep, so we fill our bucket up, we measure our soap. So again, lots of different options here, but I think for me, when doing a bucket wash with soap, I like to use a dedicated wash pad, and that can either be chenille, it can be, a pad like this, very soft, like you can imagine this, this is not gonna hurt your paint, but, it's gonna hold enough water, which the water, the surfactants from the soap on the surface, that's what's causing that safe cleaning action, right? As far as sponges go, I think on these, I like to kind of stay away from the sponges per se, unless it's like the chenille noodle sponges. But there's certain sponges that are for more rinseless wash now, but I think the days of a bucket wash with the old, paint tile sponge, probably shouldn't do.
So there are options out there for brushes.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't like brushes because
Yeah.
I feel like that's where damage comes in. And you could, hand washing, you could end up damaging the car by using the wrong wash media. And we've all been to like the self-serve car washes where they have the brushes on the wall.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is, one, it's not real soft in the first place. And two, you don't know who used it before you.
Yeah.
You
What did they use it to brush with?
You could have had a concrete truck come in and then like they're scrubbing out the back of their truck and then put it on the wall, and now you're transferring it to your car. So I tend to stay away from brushes. If you're gonna go to a self-serve, and you can bring this stuff to a self-service car wash and do this yourself too. Don't use that brush on the wall.
Yeah.
All right, technique when you're washing, okay? So by using this mitt, we want to make sure that anything that comes into contact with this mitt is that, when we go and touch it with the paint, we want to make sure that none of that is there. So we usually start from top to bottom. Where you could potentially damage the paint is by washing like the bottom of the car first, right? And then coming to the hood, because all of that dirt and grime may be under there and it gets on there. So usually start washing from the top to the bottom. And if you have the two buckets, we rinse it in the water bucket. Usually have a grit guard at the bottom, and that can kind of scrape against the mitt there to loosen up all the stuff. And then we'll wring it out and put it back into the soap bucket, bring it back to the car. And that's going to be the safest way to make sure that there's not anything in this mitt that'll potentially scratch the paint. Scrubbing. You talked about Dawn dish soap, like when you're washing dishes, you're scrubbing.
Scrubbing, yeah.
I'm gonna scrub the car, right?
No. No, because if you did your job on the rinsing, right, got all the debris off there, the soap, the mitt, it's all gonna do the work for you. It's really just gliding it across the surface, right?
Okay.
The only part that I can think you might end up needing to scrub is maybe some bugs on the front. But otherwise, like hoods, doors, let the chemicals and the tools do the work, right?
Again, this is where the damage come in. If you have contaminants, it could be sap, it could be tar, it could be bugs, it could be bird poop, it could be whatever. Like you have that initial, you want to scrub it, right? Like, oh, I'm going to scrub this off, but that's where scratches come in. So there are chemicals dedicated to remove pretty much any contaminant that's sitting on your paint. It's much better to use a chemical to dissolve whatever's on there rather than to scrub it off. So just try to avoid any scrubbing. If you got tar on there, if you got something on there, just wash it because you can use separate chemicals after the wash to safely remove that stuff.
Absolutely. So then once you've washed the car, now we have soap all over the car, then we're going to rinse it. Now let's talk about that a little bit because it makes a difference where you live, what the temperature is, what time of year it is. So my suggestion here is that if you are in a very warm area and you have lots of sunshine, you might want to work in sections, right? But if it's cooler, you know, under 70 degrees, you may have sunshine, but if the car's not going to dry super fast, you could wash the whole car before you rinse, because we don't want to end up with water spots, which is another reason why washing your own car, if not done properly, could cause more damage, right?
Yeah, and it is a good idea. You know, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think this is important. You can test your water, right? There's testers to test the parts per million, and this is the mineral content within water. If you have a very high, like you're in the 400, 500, 600 parts per million, you may be on well water. It's probably, you want to get some sort of system, a DI, a deionizer water system treatment to remove a lot of that, because if the water does dry on there, all those minerals will be left over and it's going to make it hard, and it could potentially cause damage. So test your water. Maybe it's a good idea before you actually start doing that, especially if you're working outside in the sun and everything too. But otherwise, I mean, just work fast. You know, as long as that water's not drying completely on the car, you should be fine.
And very good point. You just want the surface to stay wet, whether it be with the soap or the water. It just needs to be staying wet until you're ready to dry. So now let's go back to rinsing real quick. So you mentioned starting washing from the top down. So rinse from the top down too, right? Because if you rinse from the bottom up, you're really just wasting time. Make sure you focus on all the cracks and crevices. You don't want to leave the soap in there. You know, so I like to start at the top and then just follow the body lines and then just continue rinsing. So you want to make sure you rinse the car really, really well, because you don't want any soap to dry on there. And we also don't want to leave the surfactants on the surface, because those can tend to attract dust later. So we want to make sure we're getting that soap fully rinsed off the surface, for sure.
All right, drying the car. Okay. A lot of damage can be caused on the drying. So when you're washing the car, you have this nice lubricated soap, you're washing the car, but when you rinse it, you just have water on there, and water is not a great lubricant. So, so you want to make sure, one, that you're using a proper drying towel that's soft. You know, this is a nice microfiber soft towel, again, developed for car paint, the sensitive car paint. Some of the bath towels and everything, they're different types of material and fabric and everything that are probably going to be a little more damaging than a dedicated drying towel.
And then back to even the experience. The experience is not going to be as great with a bath towel or a terry cloth towel. It's not going to absorb correctly. You know, you might get frustrated, you might leave streaks and things like that. So absolutely a dedicated drying towel. And for me, I always just keep these, you know, they are only for drying the car. Like, they don't get used for anything else. They get washed by themselves. So you'll have a better experience, and then it's safer for the car if you do have dedicated drying towels. And then we have chemicals that make the drying process a little bit easier as well, right? So we call them drying aids. And there's lots of different options. There's options all the way from ones with very little protection, and then you can also have drying aids that do have protection, right? So Beadmaker is one of my favorite drying aids. I actually love to use Beadmaker wet. I pretty much only use it wet. So Beadmaker is a true paint sealant, but with a couple sprays per panel, it helps you dry easier, and you are leaving behind a little bit of protection.
So a couple different ways you can use this. You can spray it directly on the surface, a couple sprays. You don't want to go around the entire car and spray it all, because it'll dry. Just work at one. Or you can spray, you know, 3-4 sprays into a towel and then dry it that way. That is giving it the lubrication that it needs, you know, to safely dry the vehicle. And it leaves a little bit of protection behind. So you've seen how flat the water behavior is on this paint. What that tells me is that there's no kind of protection, and the Beadmaker is not only going to add that lubrication to dry it, but next time we go wash it, it's going to be hydrophobic, and we won't have to dry all. This is a lot of water sitting on there, so it takes a lot of time and a lot of towels and a lot of wiping to be able to remove this. And we don't want to wipe, you know, keep wiping this, and the way the water is, we're going to have to wipe way too much and then potentially cause marring or damaging by over wiping this car. So Beadmaker, very easy to use. Again, you can spray some sprays right on the panel if you want, and then we're going to dry it right as we go.
Yeah, power blower.
Are we gonna, you know, do some yard work now?
Yeah. Yep. So again, I have a dedicated blower for my cars. Now they make them, you know, they're quite powerful. They've got the stubbier nozzle, right? You don't want to necessarily use your standard leaf blower nozzle because you could damage the car. These ones are nice with the stubby nozzle, but this is going to let you clean out or dry out all the cracks, dry those wheels. The cracks, if we think about it, are the car wash nemesis, right? If we don't dry out the cracks, that's what drips all over, and then you have drips all over. So usually what I do is I do a one pass with my towel, I kind of dry the car, then I blow out all the cracks, and then I go back and dry again, kind of touch it up. And so this can be very, very helpful. And depending on the car and what protection's already on the vehicle, sometimes you can absolutely just fully dry the vehicle with the blower. If you don't have a leaf blower, but you have an air compressor with a blowgun, you know, that's always a good tool too. Just having air makes a big difference.
Another common mistake that may end up causing damage is we're all human. We're gonna wash the car, but there may be a couple spots we end up missing, right? And we're drying, we see like a big chunk like, hey, I forgot to wash it.
Yeah.
You know, the best thing that what I usually do is I go grab that wash bucket and I wash it and re-rinse it. It's very easy. You know, one of the ways you'll cause damage is just by like, I'm just gonna dry it, you know, and rub it into the paint. You know, that'll end up, you know, with debris in your towel and end up causing paint damage. But there is also other products out there like rinseless washes and no rinse washes that are made to lubricate the paint to remove some of that. So you could have a rinseless wash spray or some sort of no rinse and spray that towel or even bead maker to have that lubrication to pull it off.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And then if you want to get real fancy with your car wash, right, you would finish the tires. I'm a big fan of Tire Shine. One, I think that it does serve a purpose to keep the tires hydrated so they don't kind of turn brown, and, you know, that can be kind of the icing on the cake, right? So for me personally, I like to choose a dressing that leaves the tires kind of with an OEM, nice, dark, rich finish. I don't like anything sticky, gooey that's gonna sling down the side. So, you know, one of my favorite dressings is Dynamic, which is a silicone-based water dressing. So it does have, you know, it does last a good amount of time. It doesn't sling, it kind of self-levels. So it's just a really easy to use tire dressing that, you know, is not gonna leave it, you know, donut glaze. So if you want to get fancy, you can absolutely do tire dressing.
Absolutely. All right, that is the wash process and tips and tricks from, you know, to keep it safe as possible and hopefully not damaging the vehicle too. So, hey, this is a great community. There's a lot of great comments in the section below. If you have any more advice on safely washing your car, please go down to the comment section. Let's have some conversation.
Yeah, anything else you want to know,
safely wash a car.
you know, leave us a comment. We'll make a video.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.